Hi, welcome to today's sequence. Today we're going to be looking at a sequence from Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. We'll take a look at how we arrive at this subtly amazing moment. Let's play the sequence. Perhaps it's because the filmmakers kept the 40s in mind, but the sequence works amazingly in black and white. FYI for those that aren't familiar with this film, it hit theaters in 1998. But I think more than that, it speaks volumes about how clear and motivated each shot is. I'm including a version of the sequence that doesn't have my notes on here first, so that you can go back and reference it once you've watched the video all the way through. It's probably hard to appreciate motion and leading the eye when a video is constantly starting and stopping. Some of you may be wondering why I didn't choose a more exciting part of the film. Believe me, I know there are many more memorable sections in this film, as this is a war film after all, but I personally get really excited about moments like these. It takes good build-up for the heart-racing moments to induce any real stakes, just like how in music, good variation is necessary for those upbeat moments to actually feel upbeat. You'll see how the filmmakers consciously set this sequence up to give meaning behind all the fighting and substance to what comes later in the film. This is part 1 of 2, but both parts will cover leading the eye. In this first part, we'll have an emphasis on motion to inspire cuts. I'll probably cover this topic again in the future, as it's such a rich field to explore. This sequence comes right after Saving Private Ryan's infamous D-Day opening, but it's much more subdued than that. It's one where we can easily see where the eye is led. Let's go back real quick. We're going to see a lot of different ways and tools used to initiate cuts and lead the eye, but one of the biggest tools used is definitely motion. Motion of the characters, and motion of the camera. Here I label the motion of the character as a 1/2 motion initiation. Part of the reason why I labeled it this way is because the direction of the motion is irrelevant. It is purely to prep the viewer for change. You'll see this multiple times through this beginning. Another tool used is the motion of the camera. It's extremely subtle, but you can see that the camera adjusts ever so slightly to the left. Our eyes are almost carried to the next cut. I mentioned a reset here like I did in my screen direction video. Much like that concept, this concept resets the visual so we can see something new on screen without it being too jarring. In this case, because there's so much movement going on, and the wipe across the foreground is so prominent, our eyes are forced to blink, and therefore this next sudden camera move feels natural. Something to note here is that there is not a whole lot that the eye can rest on. This moment is strictly to show how many people there are and how busy they are. Up to this moment, we've just been setting up the setting, but now, as we look over this character's shoulder, we are now stepping into the meat of the sequence, punctuated by the voiceover as well. But we'd know this even without the sound turned on because this is the first time we use this type of shot. We are looking over this typer's shoulder to see what they are doing. And right after, we are rewarded with what it is. Something to note here is that this wasn't just a mere cut to a close-up, but rather a camera move. Many times, particularly in non-action moments, we become very aware of the camera when it starts to move. This is mitigated in this moment by the character motivating the camera move itself, and also the curiosity that the filmmakers created. We as the audience want to know what these people are doing, and therefore the camera move isn't so obvious. As the audience, we feel as though we willed it over. I have been interchanging between a red and yellow dot. This is to mark when a cut happens, and generally, what our eyes are focused on in that particular moment. Note how little our eyes have to search for what to look at between cuts. These next few shots are the next step in our story contained within our sequence. If the first moment was a setup, and the second was an explanation, these here are introducing the quote-unquote conflict, or why we are watching this sequence in the first place. This also happens to be the introduction to the conflict for the entire film. Now this is our fun cut here, but let's briefly look at some of the things that have been happening up until this moment. Even though there's so much movement happening around the focal point of the scene, we end up focusing on the character because all the other movement has been set up previously. These movements just become background noise. Even when our eyes do wander, we end up constantly going back to what we should be looking at because the movement is so radically different. We'll see this happen again later on in the sequence. Moments where the filmmakers want us to get extra information, but keep us returning to the character. Now let's take a look at this fun cut. This is the widest we've been so far, and therefore is jarring for us as the audience. Her acting made us consciously aware of an issue, but the sudden reverse angle cut to a wide made us subconsciously feel that this is big. Something has happened and it needs to be taken care of. We could have easily just had a reaction shot and move on to the next story point, but the sudden cut to the other side of the set brings us into the story. It escalates the stakes, even though we don't know what the issue even is yet. Let me tell you, this is really cool stuff. You'll notice how all the shots, scenes, and cuts up until now were building up to this one cut. The, oh, we have a problem and need to do something about it moment. Even though this moment may not seem important, this is where the film actually starts. The D-Day sequence was just a hook. Mind you, I do think that the hook is necessary and an awfully cool way to get the audience invested in the film. But it's this moment here that makes us curious about why all that and what's to come even matters. Of course, the sequence isn't over yet, but we are leading up to it in part 2. I hope you enjoyed this video, maybe even learned or reviewed something you wanted to know more about. Thanks for coming by, and see you in part 2.